They say it's one thing to be raped, it's another thing for that to be filmed and then globally distributed for the rest of my life.
What is like the overall mission of Trafficking Hub?
Trafficking Hub is solely, specifically about holding Pornhub accountable for. They found dozens of illegal videos on the site within. She was found in 58 videos being raped and abused on the site. They were begging for those videos to be taken down. They say, even after I'm dead, I know that people will be getting money and pleasure from the worst moments of my life.
Hello, everybody. You are listening or watching Chatting with Candice. I'm your host, Candice Horbacz. Before we jump into this podcast, I just wanted to say thank you to Stardust for all of those cups of coffee. And if you want to donate to the podcast, you can go to chattingwithcandice.com and click that little link that says Buy Me a Coffee. It all goes back into the show and into production, and it is very much appreciated. This week, we have a very dark topic, a very hard topic, a very important topic. This is not a trigger warning because those don't friggin' work, but this is just set and setting. Make sure that there's no littles around. Make sure that you have your earbuds in. It is explicit. It is hard to listen to, but again, it's very important. And this guest is, I think, very often villainized and scrutinized. And I was a little bit nervous to have her on the show because I've just seen the hit pieces written on her where she's depicted as somebody who is anti-sex work, anti-porn, and has an ulterior agenda. I wanted to have her on to find out for myself. And I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised with this conversation. I think that what she's doing is very important, and she's actually creating a lot of change that is needed within the industry. And this is coming from someone who is a freedom maximalist. So know that going in. I think this is a really important conversation. I hope you do too. Please help me welcome Laila Mickelwait. Hello, Laila. Welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm sure that this conversation is probably going to ruffle a lot of feathers. I believe you are coworkers or friends with Benjamin, right? Benji Nolat.
Yeah, I actually work with the Justice Defense Fund since very late 2020. I launched my own nonprofit organization called the Justice Defense Fund, but I did work with Benji and the team for many years prior to that with Exodus Cry. So
Yeah, he's a wonderful
he
guy.
is. Yeah,
I think he gets a bad rep out there.
Yeah.
I guess let's jump into it. You were the founder of Trafficking Hub?
Yes. The
Okay.
Trafficking Hub Movement. Yep, to hold Pornhub accountable.
Okay, so let's get into what is Trafficking Hub first off, and then what's the mission of Trafficking Hub?
Sure. Yes. So the story of the evolution of Trafficking Hub is told in my new book that's coming out, or it's out now. Goodness gracious, as of yesterday. Takedown, inside the fight to shut down Pornhub. But the evolution of the Trafficking Hub movement started unexpectedly in early 2020, really February 1st, 2020, in the middle of the night, when I was rocking my baby who was crying at all hours and thinking about a story of a 15-year-old girl who I had recently read days after he was born, the story of a 15-year-old girl who was missing for an entire year, and she was finally found when a Pornhub user tipped off her mother that she was found in 58 videos being raped and abused on the site, and they were able to locate her and help her. And there was another, this was at the very end of 2019 when these headlines were making news. The London Sunday Times had done an investigation into Pornhub, and they found dozens of illegal videos on the site within minutes, even children as young as 3. And so I was up that night thinking about these stories, and a question popped into my mind, which was, how did this happen? Because this is the world's largest and most popular porn site. They have this global brand that everybody seems to trust. And I decided to test the upload system for myself. And I learned what millions of people already knew, because at that time they had 6.8 million uploads to the site in 2019 that had gone through the exact same process that I did. And that was that all it took was an email address to upload user-generated homemade sex videos to the site. And because of that, the site had become infested with videos of real sexual crime. And so that kind of just was so alarming. The implications of that, I think at the time they had almost 11 million videos on the site and 40 million images. And just to think that all of those videos were uploaded without verifying that an ID to make sure that they weren't children, or verifying a consent form to make sure they're not a rape or trafficking victim, and that the site was full of awash with illegal content, and felt like I have to sound the alarm on this. This is not okay. So burst of inspiration, started the hashtag Trafficking Hub, and a Twitter account with a few thousand followers, and people started to pay attention. And one follower turned the hashtag into the logo of Pornhub, Trafficking Hub, and kind of used that and sent that. And one other follower said, "Oh, you should start a petition," and just did that. I wrote an op-ed that actually helped a lot, and I copied and pasted that into the petition. The petition went viral. And today, on that petition, we have 2.3 million signatures from every country. But that was the genesis, like that night, and that kind of organic, unexpected moment was what spiraled into the Trafficking Hub movement.
So is the mission just to go after Pornhub? Like, where are you with all of that? Because I know obviously Visa, MasterCard pulled out. Now they're, I think, only taking crypto, and we can get into like the evolution of how their company has changed since then, because it's been a drastic change for that company. So does it end with Pornhub, or what is like the overall mission of Trafficking Hub?
Yeah, Trafficking Hub is solely specifically about holding Pornhub accountable for the global monetization and distribution of criminal content, including child abuse, rape, sex trafficking, and all forms of non-consensual content, image-based sexual abuse, which, many people know that as revenge porn, but, we don't like to call it porn because it's not porn, it's criminal content. So that is the mission of Trafficking Hub, is to hold Pornhub and its executives accountable, really to shut down Pornhub. Like, that was the call to action, when realizing how much of that content was non-consensual, being monetized for profit knowingly. And I think like the details that are in the book, I think those are really important for people to understand why a call to shut down the site. It seems severe, right? It seems extreme in some, to some people, but when you realize the depths and you peel back the onion layers of complicity and knowing complicity of Pornhub and its executives in doing this and destroying and shattering the lives of countless victims, it's like the only response feels like severe actions, severe harm deserves severe consequences. And if we're ever to really bring true justice to victims and then be a deterrent for other abusers, so they feel like this is not the cost of doing business, like there will be a real consequence. The call to action is to shut down Pornhub. But I think what's important is that it's not enough to just hold one company and its executives accountable, although it's important to bring healing to victims and closure, to have accountability, but to implement policies to make sure it doesn't happen again. So, that specifically for Trafficking Hub and the work that I'm doing is we're calling for mandatory third-party age and consent verification for every individual and every user-generated porn video on every site that's distributing user-generated porn. So basically like 2257, but applied to modern pornography distribution.
So are you suggesting that would just be for the people that were uploading, or also the consumers?
So this is for people who are uploading or in the video. So,
Okay.
verifying the uploader, because, in 2020, people could just anonymously upload, even using a VPN. So not only just an email address and a fake username, but they could even mask their location with VPNs. So complete anonymity. And, Pornhub had developed a mirror site on the dark web, even for further, privacy and anonymity and viewing that content. But this is focused on those who are in the videos. Although there's a wave of concern right now and legislation and action to protect kids from accessing that content. And I think that is a very important initiative, because I think adult content needs to be for adults and of adults. And so,
Well, what's an interesting
yeah.
statistic around that, because I definitely want to get into that, because as of now, Pornhub specifically is not allowed in 8 states. So it's Texas, Utah, Mississippi, Virginia, Louisiana, Arkansas, Montana, and North Carolina, which to me is kind of silly because with a VPN, it's an easy workaround. And then we're also only targeting these really big mainstream adult companies. And what's there's a lot of edges to this. So one is those, like it or not, are the safer companies out of all of the companies. If you go to like these small dodgy ones that are, a lot of them are in Florida, a lot of them are in like these small towns, they are wildly more dangerous, unsafe, and not following protocol, paperwork, legislation, all of that. So you're actually punishing what is mostly the better actors of the group. And then you're kind of like you're forcing a lot of that underground. So it's like you're putting the spotlight on not necessarily where I think the most change could happen by doing that. And then I think it's also a false sense of protection when it comes to minors that are consuming content that is not for them, because you think now that it's banned in your state, well, now my kid's safe, I can give them this device. It's not. They're going to outwit you every single turn that they can because they're younger and they're more privy to technology. So I don't see that. I don't see that as like as doing anything, honestly. It's like parents should have the responsibility to know what your kids are doing online. You can install apps. Don't give them devices that they're not ready to handle. And I think that's where it ends. Like I'm team like small government. The less
Yeah,
regulation, the better.
less regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely this huge debate around that user side of things, and for my part and the work that we do at the Justice Defense Fund, we're solely, advocating for, and our work is around, and Trafficking Hub as well is
Mhm.
around those who are in the videos
Mhm.
that are being consumed versus those who are using it.
Mhm.
And I know there's many different mechanisms for protecting kids from viewing it.
Mhm.
And lots of debate. I mean, there's currently, they're going to the Supreme Court to even find out, is it constitutional to have these particular protections in place for users.
Right.
So I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the best way to protect kids from viewing necessarily is, because there's layers of protection. There's also, a lot of people say it's only on the parents, but then I also think about kids that don't have available, or parents who are just so busy putting food on the table, they don't have time to be monitoring their kids use, or kids in foster care, like vulnerable kids who may not have that oversight. And so I guess, yeah, it's an important conversation. And like, I'm so open to hearing all of the different ways. I know people talk about device level verification for users.
Get
I
your
know
kid
there's
a
things.
flip phone. You know what I mean? Yeah, I challenge that. No parent is too busy, and if you're in a bad socioeconomic stance, then why'd your kid have an iPhone? You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
another interesting statistic, it's over 80% of children that first watch a piece of explicit content, it's actually not on a porn site. So
Mhm.
it's on a social media platform. So
Yeah.
again, like when we have things that kind of come in as the solution to a problem, and I very much think it's a problem. I do not think that kids should be watching this, like, to make that obviously clear if it's
Mhm.
not. But when you focus on the problem that is supercharged, because pornography is supercharged for a lot of people, it's still very taboo, and you're like, well, this is the bad guy, it's only Pornhub, right? Well, we're not looking at the other places that are actually the real danger for children. So I pulled up numbers for 2020 just because a lot of those were inflated because people were stuck at home for so long. So while I obviously am on board with making sure that content that is uploaded is consenting adults, I think that is very important. I don't think you should ever have a site where you're putting explicit content and there's no requirements. That doesn't seem logical. But Facebook alone, and this is what they reported, so this is probably a much smaller number than what is actually on the site, was 21.4 million cases of child exploitation content. Instagram was 1.4 instances. TikTok was actually super low at 22,000, and Pornhub was 13,000. So when you look at this and you're like, okay, well, Pornhub is the problem, we're talking 13,000 people compared, or cases versus 21 million. So
Yeah.
I guess why
Mhm.
is Facebook
Yeah. I
holding
mean,
child
I think
accountable?
that, look, all of these platforms that are enabling or distributing this content need to be held fully accountable to the full extent of the law, 100%. You know, I, the genesis of Trafficking Hub was a discovery
Mhm,
of the problematic nature and the complicity of Pornhub and its owners and what was going on. And I think one of the things that we uncovered in this investigation and kind of this movement of kind of peeling back the onion layers, specifically on Pornhub, was they went for over 13 years not reporting any instances, not a single instance of child sexual abuse material that they were aware of. So there was a Canadian parliamentary hearing where, under oath, the leaders of the child protection agencies in Canada and the United States that would be the clearinghouses for this content where they would be reporting, they testified that Pornhub hadn't made a single report to them since its genesis until after everything started to go viral in 2020.
mm,
And they were actually, hiding child sexual abuse material that they were aware of from authorities for over 13 years. And, for me, I think of, well, if they were reporting, and it's actually illegal. So in Canada, there's mandatory reporting laws
mhm,
for companies that know about child sexual abuse material, and there's actually criminal penalties, including up to 5 years in jail for not reporting. And
mhm,
they weren't reporting. And even here, we have laws about mandatory reporting. And
mhm,
I think about, you know, how many children could have been rescued out of situations of abuse if they had been doing what they were supposed to do. So, as far as numbers go, I don't think we really know the scope of the child sexual abuse, but also the non-consent piece of it, where,
mhm,
it might have been consensually recorded, but also uploaded non-consensually, and adult rape, trafficking, and all of that was also proliferating on the site. But I would never make excuses for any other company, including Twitter, who,
mhm,
distributes unverified content. I think, my hope is through this effort to hold Pornhub accountable, that we cause a ripple effect that impacts all internet websites, that, causes safeguards, that causes accountability, and for them to care more about what is being distributed on their sites. And so my hope is that, we'll see not only Pornhub changed and held accountable, but we'll see all the other sites as well. And so we'll make the internet itself a safer place, is the goal at the end of the day.
mhm. So, as far as, the non-reporting goes, is there a way to know that they were aware of the content that was there prior?
Yes, yes, they were aware because there's so many instances and evidence of even victims who were reaching out, emails that they were begging for those videos to be taken down, and they were ignored by police. They were ignored by victims in, many cases where victims were saying over and over again that they would be hassled for, proving that they were a victim in the video. So, they weren't requiring an ID and proof of consent to upload the content, but then when a victim would be begging to take it down, they would be hassled to prove that this is you, prove that it's non-consent, prove that you're underage in the video. And, in the meantime, 5 million users an hour had the opportunity to be able to download that content, because they actually had placed a download button on every single video.
Mhm,
And moderators from the company came forward, and I said, well, why would they have a download button on the content? And they said it was because the business model was that they just needed more and more and more content to be able to drive traffic to the site to sell 4.6 billion ad impressions on the site every day. So the more content they had, the better. And it didn't really matter that much what's in the content. It's just they needed URLs and tags and titles to be picked up in Google to drive traffic to the site. And so they wanted people to download and make compilations and re-upload as long as it had a different title, as long as it had different tags. Like, that was what was important. So
mhm,
they even had a download button to be able to kind of recirculate that content. And for victims, became a perpetual nightmare of just trying to get that content down, and then it would get put back up, and then trying to get it down again. And, this was the nightmare for so many victims who came forward.
Yeah, what's really interesting is when I remember when all of this was really picking up a lot of steam, it was all over my Twitter feed at the time. And so many people had either been reposting it and signing the petition or had like so much criticism because for some reason, when you're in the industry, they feel this is my guess. It's because it's constantly so attacked already from the outside that they feel like they can't scrutinize their own because then it gives them less credibility, but it's actually the opposite. It's like by not calling out bad behavior, you're actually proving everyone else's bad faith in the industry itself. So it's kind of it is your responsibility to say something if you see something or something that's not above board when you are within said industry. And I remember people coming to the defense and they're like, oh, because these numbers are real on the other sites. Like as the reporting goes, there's statistically more illegal content on Facebook than there is on these tube sites. But the difference is that they are actively reporting it and they're trying to do something about it, where this other company, their entire business model was you can just upload anything with no consent. And I remember, I don't know if it was Pornhub or if it was someone that worked there or with one of their sister companies, but they were saying, no, we verify all people. We have forms, we do the 2257s, and we do an ID check. And then I responded and I was like, well, actually, that's not true because you have so much of my content that is pirated and that I shot myself. You didn't know, like, and it could have been non-consensual. You don't know when I shot it. Yeah, you have my ID from these other things, but you not for this particular thing. You don't know, again, like the date it was filmed. So there are question marks. So if you did that with me, I know you're not doing that with like Jill from Louisiana who has uploading something. So let's not pretend that there were safeguards there because there definitely weren't. There are now, which is good. So that's a huge step in the right direction. Where do you see the industry of tube sites going? Because like I'm a firm advocate for paywalls. I think that is one way to
Mhm.
hope that the person on the other end is 18, right? You have a debit card or a credit card that you're usually 18 to have. So it's like it's just like an extra barrier. So it's like
Right.
one, it's not obviously foolproof, but it's something. So I do think that there should be paywalls. I don't like being able to scroll and just see something explicit. And I come from that industry, right? Like I don't want that on my page. Like I unfollow people that do that because I'm like, that's not for me. So I do think that there should be a paywall. Like where do you see the future of tube
Yeah.
sites going?
Yeah. Well, really quick to your previous point too, and then I'll go there as well. But one of the things that's detailed in the book was this kind of evolution of so many different people coming together, and some of the most important people that helped over the last 4 years were in the porn industry,
Hmm.
or actually, porn performers who had said, like you just mentioned, that they were spending hours a day scouring MindGeek's tube sites, trying to find their stolen content to
And they
put
don't take it down still, even with,
for their
yeah,
takedown, right? And then it would get re-uploaded the next day. So,
yep.
like, I do tell a conversation I had with early on with a porn performer. She's like, shut them the fuck down. I'm so mad. Like,
Mhm.
I'm so sick of MindGeek doing this. And they built their empire on stolen and pirated content. And as they were looking on YouPorn and PornTube and Tube8, because they own like so many of these porn tube sites. But on Pornhub, they were finding clearly illegal content, children, rape
Oof.
victims, unconscious. I mean, unconscious to the point where their bodies are totally limp. They're not pretending; they're totally limp. The perpetrators are touching the eyeballs to prove that they're unresponsive. Things like that, and sending me these links because they're as disturbed by it as anybody else, and they don't want to be associated with it. But one thing I did notice was a lot of them were coming privately to me to help and to express support, and hundreds if not thousands of them were actually signing and sharing the Trafficking Hub petition, probably under some anonymous names as well. But they were afraid of speaking publicly against MindGeek because of their control over the industry, and they felt
Mhm,
like they could be blacklisted.
mhm,
They could be, their career and their livelihood could be destroyed if they
mhm.
went against the dominant company. And so I think there was a fear, but you know,
But that's
to
such bullshit, and I'll call that out all day because that was my experience, and I got blacklisted for a long time because I was a contract girl for a long time. That was pretty
Mhm.
much my whole career. So I was with MindGeek most of my career exclusively, and I just saw so much bad behavior. I mean, obviously their company is in Montreal, and the way that everything works in the industry is everything is kind of decentralized, and a lot of that is strategic, right? So if it's one director that you're hiring as a contractor, you're not really responsible for him and his behavior, yada yada. But there would be just like a ton of bad behavior and no one saying anything, and me being like all of my boundaries completely being disregarded and transgressed. And finally I was like, enough is enough. And if you're doing this to me, who is like someone who gets millions and millions and millions of views and has a huge platform, what are you doing to some girl who has no idea how to say no and no platform to speak up? And I got fired immediately. I got blacklisted from the industry, and I
Wow.
still did the right thing. Like, still do the right thing. Like, don't be a
Mhm.
coward if you see something and it'll work out. Like, firmly believe that. I believe in fate. I believe that when you do good things come to you. And I think that like doing things out of fear or not doing things out of fear is never the answer. So like
Mhm.
if you're
Mhm.
scared that you're going to lose your porn job because and you see something illegal happening or it's like coercion or whatever, like shame on you, say something.
Yeah, and there's I don't know if you've noticed, but there's some lawsuits recently filed. Porn performer, I can't recall her name right now, but she was exploited. She said she was forced into doing, violent sex acts that she didn't consent to doing, and MindGeek was responsible. They were the ones that were shooting, organized shooting. That was their production company, and she's suing them now. I think it's tens of millions of dollars that she's suing
Huh.
for. Um, but yeah, that's it. So MindGeek, when all this began, really, MindGeek was a true villain to not only the victims, but also to those many of those in the porn industry who
Mhm.
saw MindGeek as this exploitative entity that actually had, destroyed the traditional porn industry and put out everything out there for free and reluctantly complying with the system because it was the only way to get seen. They're like, I have to get my videos views, and
Mhm.
because Pornhub dominates views, if I don't put my content on Pornhub, I'm just not going to make it. And so like they felt like they were even almost forced to participate in the system that they didn't even agree with. And so there's like that layer of it as well. But again, so many of the allies that helped in this whole effort were even employed by MindGeek.
Mm.
I consider some of the whistleblowers who came forward now after so many dozens of hours of conversations and even meeting in person, and that I would consider them friends. Have so much compassion for their situation. One of them that I detail in the book who came forward to help, was just a very underpaid employee in Cyprus. And he was sexually abused as a child. So it was very traumatizing for him. They had to watch, they were reprimanded if they didn't watch at least 700 videos per 8-hour shift. Some of them were watching up to 2,000 videos per shift where they just have to
What are they
like,
watching for?
just click
To
through.
approve or like
Yeah, to
upload or
approve the video. So this is what we discovered. So like peeling back the onion layers of
Mhm.
MindGeek, like, and this is how I kind of, when in the book, it's like you go on this journey of uncovering discovery with me as you meet these, moderators and people who are coming forward. But, he produced documents, internal documents with the schedules, with the names of the moderators. This, on the outside to the public, Pornhub was defending themselves, saying, we have a large and extensive team of human moderators that is viewing every single video before it's uploaded to the site.
Mhm.
Now, we'll go back to that in a second, but that wasn't even true. Like they
No.
had 30 moderators for all of MindGeek's tube sites. So not only Pornhub,
Whoa.
but YouPorn, RedTube, XTube, Tube8, GayTube, all of the tubes, right? 30. And they worked 10 at a time on 8-hour shifts. So think about bathroom breaks, cigarette breaks. And they were tasked with reviewing these millions of videos, millions of images, and they just skipped through them. They had the sound off and they just skipped through them. But they would get uploaded live on the site, right? So they weren't putting a queue where you have to wait like 2 days and then they all went live. And then after that, they would just be skipped through by these moderators. And he said, I know moderators that approved very young children on the site because they're not even watching them. They're just like, they have to meet a quota. He's like, we have to meet the numbers. And then I, press him and kind of not in an aggressive way or anything, but just like, tell me how this works. And I said, well, how can you figure out like who's 18 and who's not? Like, I mean, even a pediatrician can't tell who's 16 and who's 18. Like, think about like a boy or a girl. Their body at 16 is almost identical to what it looks like when it's 18, right? So like you can't, it's literally impossible to decipher. So they're guessing. So he's like, well, we would just, if they were wearing nail polish or
what?
Yeah. So like they were trying to decide if it was too young of a person, whether like one of the things he said was like, are they wearing nail polish, or what does the room look like? Or if they cried too much, like he's like, if they cried too much, if they didn't cry enough or whatever, they wouldn't consider it rape. He said, at the end of the day, we're just guessing who is rape. But then you think about rough sex, right? Like,
yeah,
how can you tell the difference between rough sex and rape? Or
fantasy
like, so
play.
much of it is consensually filmed, right? So it was just mind blowing, right? But they knew it, and they only had, and so like going back to Facebook, like Facebook has 15,000 moderators. Pornhub had 10 per shift, 30, and they're lying to the public saying they have a large and extensive. But then let's go back to their statement that said that they view and approve them. Okay, well, that's worse because there's kids that are on the site that are like 12 years old. I mean, there was a case in Alabama of a 12-year-old boy who was drugged. He was overpowered. He was raped in 23 videos that were being sold on the site. And think about a drugged, overpowered 12-year-old. So they're viewing and approving those videos is what they're saying. Like there's toddlers, 3-year-olds, right, on the site. So they're viewing, or unconscious women, like clearly unconscious. Okay, well, that means that they're more complicit. That means that they viewed it. They thought this should be on Pornhub. They approved it. Then they put ads on it, and they put ads before it and around it. And if you press pause in the middle of one of these rape videos, you get an ad. And that's not even to go into the ads. Like their whole traffic junkie system was set up where they were allowing advertisers to place targeted ads on illegal content. So I investigated that side too, but we don't have to go into that like rabbit hole. But it was almost as bad as what was happening on Pornhub, because they had like this indicator bar for advertisers where they would say like how much traffic you would get on a particular word that would indicate rape, like literally the word for rape in Chinese or Arabic, or not 18 or teeny, tiny. I described, like literally documented these, and they had the indicator bar that would show how much traffic you would get on those particular videos that were tagged or titled that way. So that's why I saw like an obvious prepubescent child being raped on the video, and then above it said an ad that said delete your history after you click here, obviously targeting pedophiles, right?
No way.
So the layers of like complicity, again, they just go so deep. And they had one person. So here's another thing. So MindGeek had 1,800 employees, hundreds of millions of dollars that they're making every year on this content. They only employed one person 5 days a week to review flagged videos. They had a policy where they wouldn't even put a video in queue for review unless it had 15 flags. So that means that a victim could flag their video 15 times and it wouldn't even be put in the queue. And they had a backlog of 706,000 flagged videos. And the CEO of MindGeek, in emails that were uncovered, when he's talking about this policy, he calls it good and reasonable. So
What's good and reasonable?
his
The amount or his
the
policy?
amount, yeah, like the system. They're kind of like talking about the fact that it would take 15 flags before it would be reviewed. The schedule of having the one person 5 days a week. They're discussing the backlog of 706,000 videos flagged, and he calls it literally, quote unquote, good and reasonable. So that's just some of the
That
examples.
just blows my mind, especially when you add in the layer of traffic, like the trafficking, or I'm sorry, yeah, the web traffic, the ads, and then the keywords, because when you shoot for a MindGeek company, they're so strict on how you shoot the scene. So you cannot have a scene where like even pretending, you can't even pretend that you're drinking alcohol, let alone intoxicated. You can't pretend, like you can't do rape fantasy, even though that is like one of the number one things that women like to consume. It's interesting. It just statistically is. You can't film that for a MindGeek company because like they don't even want a question mark around was this or wasn't this. But yet their number one site, they have keywords for it. That doesn't even make
Not even,
sense.
and not just keywords, right? Like, I mean, they
Right.
would
It's to
have
link you to a video.
yeah, like one of them is like titled "Dead Pig Drugged Half Eyes." I forget the exact one, but it's like drugged, and this is a video of like an unconscious woman, or they have the titles indicating like "Stop, it hurts," "No, don't," "Please stop." All of this stuff is just blatantly there in the titles. Sometimes even the moderators would switch up titles, switch up tags behind the
Mm.
scenes. So they part of this group of people who were working with the videos. They weren't even called, like, internally, they weren't even called moderators. They obscured it with like referral source review agent, like this random like title they used. But part of their job was to actually help figure out how to optimize. So like search engine optimization. Like,
Mhm.
so the moderators themselves would say, our job wasn't to keep illegal content off the site. It was to allow as much content to go through as possible, to allow it to be on the site and to optimize it,
Mm.
to make sure it had the right titles and tags and whatnot to be able to be picked up in popular search results and things like that. So, I mean, it's interesting to see the difference then between the studio side of things, right? And then
Mhm.
the tube site, but they feed on each other. So
Right.
MindGeek, part of their strategy was like, let's own the free sites and then let's own the paid sites. And then what we'll do is we'll advertise our paid sites on the free site. So they have like browsers and all of this like advertised all over, so people can kind of go to
Mhm.
the paid sites too. So, but that's interesting to hear about
Yeah,
the difference.
that's why I always found it so interesting because there couldn't be any question marks. I'm like, so why is it okay here and it's not okay here? And then why are you guys so strict with paperwork here, but then you're stealing my content and putting it over here? It never made any sense to me. So or does anything change now that ownership has changed?
So they have made changes. So I'd love to talk about like what's happened, but what still has yet to happen.
Mhm.
So quick like recap again, story told in the book, this journey of all of this unfolding to the point where they deleted 80% of the site, lost credit card companies, they lost their major advertisers, were afraid, even like KY Jelly and Weed Maps, like wouldn't advertise on Pornhub anymore. And the CEO and the COO were forced to resign. And then they sold the company to a hastily concocted private equity firm that ironically is called Ethical Capital Partners. So they created themselves to buy Pornhub. It's not like this was like a private equity firm that existed previously that has
Okay.
done other things. Like
Mhm.
they formed themselves to buy Pornhub, and they said, we're going to call ourselves Ethical Capital Partners. They renamed MindGeek, so they wanted to kind of distance from the toxic image of peddlers of crime, and they called themselves ILO. So they rebranded. In 2020, after all of this kind of really blew up, there was an article by the New York Times, The Children of Pornhub, that highlighted so many victim stories. Um, and the pressure was really put on them at that time. They were forced to take down that download button because that was just like an egregious feature that they had implemented on the site. They took that off, but you can still screen record. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's not like it matters that much. But then they started to require the verification of uploaders. So that's like the change that happened at the end of 2020. And they said, we're overhauling the system. No anonymous uploaders. Now you have to verify yourself to upload. But they knew it didn't solve the problem. And they pretended that they solved the problem, but it didn't. Because, for example, the 12-year-old boy I told you about, his abuser was named Rocky Shea Franklin. And we know this. He has his verification photo. Like, he was a verified uploader that was uploaded 23 rape videos of this 12-year-old child. And that is the case. Like, we have many cases, a number of the victims that are currently suing Pornhub. So there's almost 300 victims and 26 lawsuits that are currently suing Pornhub across the US, Canada, and the UK. And multiple of those are class actions on behalf of tens of thousands of child victims. But in many of these cases, they were verified uploaders that actually uploaded the abuse content and the trafficking content. So
Whoa.
they knew that didn't solve the problem because they weren't verifying who's in the videos.
Okay.
But they went on with that until now. Like, they just in January of 2024, so just a couple months ago, after they got criminally charged by the US federal government for knowingly and intentionally profiting from the proceeds of the Girls Do Porn sex trafficking operation out of San Diego. I don't know if you've heard about them, but they were criminally charged for that. And they finally said, we're going to start verifying the age and consent of people in new videos. But this doesn't fully take effect until September. So Ethical Capital Partners has owned Pornhub for over a year. And they have been profiting this whole time on unverified content. Now we estimate it's millions of videos that have been uploaded since the end of 2020 when they purged all that content. And even today, like, there is clearly illegal content still on that site. There's also videos where it's, for example, like a homeless, they call it, they degradingly will say this is a crack whore who's, doing this for $5. And, she has sores on her body. She's clearly vulnerable. She's saying, like, get it over with. You can hear her, like, just not okay with what's happening, but you can't see her face. And so even if, like, it's unverifiable because you don't see their face. So how could they verify it anyway? So all that to say, Ethical Capital Partners to this very moment is profiting from and globally distributing videos, scores of videos of unverified individuals. And much of that is currently illegal. So
I had no idea. I thought that in 2020 that they were making everyone submit IDs. So I knew that they got rid of the download button. And when I guess I misunderstood it because it's just the user. It wasn't the actual people, the participants in the video, which is insane because it's like, obviously that's not going to do much solving. So what happened to the individuals that did, for some reason, verify themselves before
So
uploading
Rocky
abuse
Shea
content?
Franklin's in jail. Like, he's in prison for 40 years in that particular example.
Yeah.
Because they subpoenaed his
That is
verification image and they put him in jail. But the company that immortalized the boy's trauma, he's suing Pornhub. Him and his mother are currently suing Pornhub. I hope they win, for immortalizing his trauma. That's exactly what the victims say. It's like, they say it's one thing to be raped. It's another thing for that to be filmed and then globally distributed for the rest of my life for profit and pleasure. They say, even after I'm dead, I know that people will be getting money and pleasure from the worst moments of my life. And to them, like, often it just, they say, it's like not even worth living. So, some of these victims feel they can't even go to the grocery store without being so paranoid that somebody has seen their trauma. This might sound a little bit strange, but this is what I've heard from multiple victims is they're like, I'd rather have it on the dark web because it's not like it's either or, right? Like we don't want it on the dark web. We don't want it anywhere at
Mhm.
all.
Mhm.
But when it's on a site like Pornhub, where it's Google search, like many victims, for example, they had their name in the title, their school, their hometown,
Wow.
where you could put their name in there and then it would pull up their Facebook and their exploitation video on
Yeah.
Pornhub. And and so it's like they were worried, did the person at the grocery store just watch my video?
Mhm.
And so it's like this terrifying existence of paranoid uh, life, and it's just crippling and debilitating. And that's what happens. And ironically, at the same time, I talk about this in my book, the owners of Pornhub and the VPs of Pornhub were using fake identities. They were hiding their names, their faces, their self from the public for so many years. The owner of Pornhub was hidden. Nobody knew who he was, the majority owner of Pornhub. And through the last 4 years, um, he was uncovered. He was named. He was located. Now he's being sued. But for example, the VP of Pornhub, he was out in the media speaking in thousands of articles, in all their like PR stunts for like save the whales and save the bees and
Mhm.
donating for breast cancer research and getting all this press around all these kinds of stunts they were doing. And he was using fake names like Corey Price, Blake White. That wasn't who he was. He was Corey Ehrman. And they were hiding themselves at the same time. They were exploiting for profit the bodies, the names, the identities of so many victims for so many years. Um, so yeah.
So why does it seem that the same laws and regulations aren't applied to explicit content? Because this is where it all begins. Obviously, there is a huge difference between an, a pirated video going up and someone being abused in that going up. That's obvious, but I feel like I have to say that because it's the internet. There's a huge difference between them, but both are illegal. And because my guess is the reason that it has gotten so rampant is because no one has given a shit about the pirating because
Mm,
it's porn and people already like they don't want to get involved, right? It's like it's not worth defending for most people because again it's seen as like lewd and taboo and it's just like it's too dirty, I don't want to look at it. But because we've allowed so much pirating to happen and we're not enforcing any kind of copyright laws or regulations, now it's so hard to tell the difference between what is just being pirated versus what is actual abuse content. And if
mhm.
we had the same laws, like if you were, and technically you do, but it's like who's going to actually spend the money to sue and pursue this, especially when it's a Hydra and they just keep getting uploaded
Yeah.
anonymously on these other sites that are still co co-owned. um,
Mhm.
you're actually making it more dangerous for innocent people. So even though people don't want to come to the defense of the poor, like porn stars, right? Because again, people don't feel like that's necessary. It's actually making it worse for
Mhm.
civilians and for victims because if it was mainstream media and you were to put Iron Man 3 out on
Mhm.
YouTube,
Right.
ripped off, you'd get sued to death for that. So
Mhm.
if we demand more and like the same level of respect and legal protection for explicit content, like it or not, you're actually creating such a much more safe ecosystem and preventing more victims because you're going to know that anything out there is uploaded legally
Yeah.
with consent by a production company or an individual, whatever it may be. And then, and like, if you have one strike against you, then you can pursue that legally, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's pirated or it's abuse content.
Totally. I'm in 100% agree with you. And I've noticed that it's like people in the porn industry want Asian consent verification because they're so tired of their own pirated content. Like, what for one, because they don't want victims to be victimized
Mm-hmm.
on the sites that they share, right? They
Mm-hmm.
don't want to share. And we've seen so many say, look, I'm off Pornhub. I am canceling my account. I do not want to have anything to do with this because I don't want my video side by side with a video of abuse like that. And they want agent consent. And they've been doing like in the right in 2257. It's normal. Like
Mm-hmm.
everybody just, this is the way it is. Like this is the way the porn industry works. For some reason, we allowed these online tube sites to get around it. Although technically, like actually they are liable. And I wish the federal government would pursue them because when you read the law, it says that anybody who transfers pornographic content, so it's like produces or transfers. So they say, oh, we're not the producers. We're just the conduit. We
Mhm.
didn't produce it, but they're the ones profiting from it. But it does say the word transfer. And they were absolutely transferring, because that download button, it wasn't like YouTube where, it's like you can download it, but you don't actually possess it on your device. It's just like you could stream it or you could watch it later without having to stream. No, like actually there was a file that would then be downloaded onto that person's device that came directly from MindGeek's servers.
Mhm.
That 100% is a transfer of content. So they should be liable for millions of 2257 violations for not verifying that content.
Mm.
So I would just make that argument. But aside from that, they should be held to the same standard, but for some reason it just, hasn't happened, but it should. And I think that those in the industry would just be like, yes, we've been doing this forever, and it makes sense to do it because it's going to help us and it's going to help non-consensual content from being uploaded. I was blown away back to the copyrighted content. So, one of the things that might shock people the most in my book, and I hope I don't want to give away too much of it, but the former owner of Pornhub, Fabian Tillman, in the midst of this, actually reached out to me saying he wanted to help. Very suspicious of his motives, and all of that is kind of revealed in the book, what those ended up being. But one of the things he said was, if you want, aside from MindGeek doing the right thing and actually taking down abuse content, what victims should do is copyright their rape videos. And it's something I had never even thought of. You're suggesting that victims copyright their abuse videos so that they can do a DMCA takedown
Well, it's
request.
more than a DMCA, so if you were to
Uh-huh.
do that, so if you don't have the actual thing copywritten, you still own it, and then you can do a DMCA and take it down, and they'll take it down, and again, it'll be uploaded probably within a couple hours. If you have the thing copywritten, yes, you can request it down, but it's an automatic fine for
Hmm.
that, whether or not but you have to prove who uploaded it, and that's where it gets dicey, and you're probably
Mm.
not gonna be able to find it unless you have a really stringent team, but it's an automatic, it's either $25,000 or $50,000 fine per upload
For the person that
for the
uploaded
person
it
that's
or
uploading it.
the
If it's
platform?
if it's
Uh-huh.
copywritten, so it's automatic,
Interesting.
there's no arguing it. It's because it's copywritten. So if you do that, also if you have a watermark, that's an additional fee. Because I'm talking to my lawyers right now because I have so much stuff out, and I'm like, I don't know what to do because I have a team that I pay
Mhm.
monthly to just go
Mhm.
to these sites and try to take them down. They're down for a minute and they're back up. And I was like, I don't, he's like, well, why don't we pursue it? And I was like, nothing is going to come of it. And he's like, how
Mhm.
about we do this? The next thing that you film, you have it copywritten. And then he was explaining all of this. And then he's like, it's an automatic fine for both. I think maybe it's both parties. I have to look into
Mhm.
that. But again, you shouldn't have to do that.
To go through those
You shouldn't
hoops. I
have to
mean,
do
I don't even know the cost, just,
that.
the process of having to go through that. I mean, it should just be if there's a notice to remove a video, there's a lot of people who are like, we need to have laws where, they have 48 hours or something. No, 1 minute is too long, because on a site that's getting 5 million visitors per hour, first of all, it has to be prevented from going up in the first place. But if it does somehow get through, I mean, they need to be 5 minutes. You have, as soon as that comes in, it just has to get immediately taken down and then maybe reviewed after. But
Mhm.
um, there shouldn't be this challenge, these hoops, these legal, barriers and expense, right? I mean, some people, they couldn't pay to have that takedown service. I know victims have complained they want to hire the same people that would do something like that. It's just it's such a huge expense. The girls do porn trafficking victims. I know, in their litigation, you can read how many of them had to hire services like that as well. But it just, yeah, there shouldn't be barriers. At the same time, MindGeek's there profiting literally from every ad click, every ad impression, every view. the longer it stays on the site. But I think we're in like total agreement on the need for agent consent verification
I
for
think it's
videos.
such an easy fix, and that's why
Yeah.
it blows my mind that it just hasn't been accepted widely or just, like, required widely. It's the
Mhm.
same requirements if you're shooting for a mainstream
Yeah.
studio. It's you have all of your paperwork, you have your 2257s, you have 2
Mhm.
forms of IDs, you have an intro interview saying, "I
Mhm.
am sober, consenting, of age, this is the date," hold up a newspaper, and then you have an exit interview. Was everything consensual that you just filmed? Are you
Yeah.
consenting to releasing this film? Like,
Yeah.
right,
And
do
where
that.
you're releasing it, right? Like
Exactly, and, like
where mhm.
exactly, and
Mhm.
then that is the only way that it's allowed to be uploaded. Like, it's so simple, and it's required by the studios. Why is it not required on the tube sites? I have no
That
idea.
would work. I was thinking about how do you get around this problem of like I described, there's so many homemade videos where you can't see the person's face.
Mhm.
And so how could they verify the ID if they can't see the person's face in the video? So they either have to not allow videos that don't show an identifiable face or do something what you're describing where it's
Right.
the
Yeah,
intro out.
if you did intro and
Mhm.
outro, you would know it was the same person. I think that would be
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's so simple, and yeah, it's a couple extra
Well,
steps.
here's the
Why not?
deal, is because they don't wanna lose profit because one moderator or one, company insider described it like this, like, they don't want any friction
You're right.
in uploading. Because they're gonna get less videos.
Mm.
Faraz Antoon, the CEO, in Uncovered Emails, when that whole thing was going down in 2020, he was complaining. He's like, "We're getting 25,000 uploads a day. With this new rule, maybe we'll get 2,000." And it's this is the thing is that they don't want friction. They don't want any barriers or anything that would deter uploads because the tube site business model relies on enormous amounts of content. If they don't have content, they said it this way: content is king. That's what the MindGeek employees said.
Mhm.
Content on the user generated porn sites, content is king. And that's why when there was a child abuse video on the site, it would get reported. So first they would try to get it down. They can't get it down, right? So then it would go through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Mhm.
They would verify that it's a child. They would go direct to MindGeek and then demand the video be taken down. And when that happened, in some instances, they would take that video down. But what they would do was they would leave that black box on Pornhub and it would say video removed at the request of NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, admitting that there was a child abuse video there, but they would keep the link live, the exact same link, the title, the tags, the comments, the views, and then they would have ads right around it or in it, in that box around it. They would have ads everywhere so that they could still get people to get that URL, all that content, all that inventory to be picked up on Google to drive people to that site. They would say, oh, this child abuse video is not here, but oh, here's this one, this other similar, right? The algorithm's gonna, and the views and the clicks and the impressions are all there to make the money. So that's like an example of they want content on the site. That's why they don't want verification.
So, geez, yeah, that's you're like, "Well, of course, just take that page down."
Yeah, but they don't want to because they need the inventory for Google. The moderator said Google's where Pornhub lives or dies. If they don't have that URL, if they don't have those tags and those titles and that SEO to pick up, then they're not driving that traffic to their site. So they want it there. They need it. It's intentional that they want to keep it there.
Oh, boy. Yeah, it's truly evil, all of that. Like, it's just there's no other word for it. Now, a challenging question. S Your critics and the biggest critics of Trafficking Hub say that there is an ulterior motive to Trafficking Hub and, Exodus Cry, and it is like religious based, and it is to ultimately get to the point where all pornography is banned and all sex work is made illegal. Do you have like a comment or pushback on that?
Yeah, I've answered that so many times over the last 4 years because it's like their number one attack. It's,
Mhm.
I talk about this in the book. It was like there's two battles going on. One is this battle against this illegal content and this true villain that is MindGeek and its owners. But then there's this other battle for the narrative around what is Trafficking Hub? What are the intentions? Like the truth in the media, right? Because one thing that was interesting is when I first wrote my op-ed that blew this kind of open, and I made damning accusations that were all true. It's not just accusations, like based on evidence. Like I said, this is a trafficking hub. These are mega pimps that are just distributing child sex crimes and trafficking and blah, blah, blah. And the only correction they had to the article was that they were technically based in Luxembourg for tax purposes, because they couldn't correct anything because it was true. So this whole time, like they couldn't fight this on the merits. So within MindGeek, they hired a very powerful PR firm called 5W out of New York. Very big PR company owned by a man named Ron Charosian, who has been condemned by the Public Relations Society of America as a stain on their profession because he would do things like create false websites to disparage his rivals and engage in all kinds of smear tactics and things like that. So, like this attack of emerging this particular narrative about Trafficking Hub that was not factual, kind of this is like the genesis of where it came from because they couldn't fight it on the merits. Like they couldn't just come out and say like we're not doing that. Actually, we have da 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 like all these policies and it's not true that there's children on our site being abused, and they couldn't do that. So their only recourse was to defame, to discredit, to try to distract, to deny. And that's what they did. And this battle is detailed in my book. And it's been so hard to try to correct it and to say, like, no, Trafficking Hub from the moment that it started was about illegal content. It was about child sexual abuse, rape, and trafficking. And it is not just a particular individual or organization. Like 600 organizations have thrown down and been involved in Trafficking Hub. It's not something that's owned by any one. And I was really intentional about this. I'm like, it needs to be a movement where everybody, like in the porn industry, if you're pro porn, if you're anti porn, if you're Muslim, if you're Christian, if you're atheist, whatever, we can agree that nobody should be raped and trafficked on the world's largest porn site. And actually, that's what happened. Like trafficking emerged, organically evolved as a movement of a very diverse group of people, which was which was the nightmare for MindGeek, right? Because like if they can just say these are just religious, crazy, right-wing, sex-hating prudes that just want to destroy the porn industry, don't listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Then they could be successful. Like they could just squash that, right? But the truth was and is that it's not that it's so many people from many different backgrounds, survivors, people in the porn industry. And that's what's in my book. And you can actually see it unfold, right? And you can see the truth about what it is, what it was. And so that's the truth about it,
So you are
And
not
there are
trying to
people who
make
are like
something.
anti-porn who are part of Trafficking Hub, and there are people who are pro-porn and all the way in between, right?
Well, I guess as far as like the leadership roles go, is there like any official leadership position on the topic of making either of those things illegal or restricted?
No, there's not that at all. And even with my organization, the Justice Defense Fund, like our mission is strictly and specifically about illegal content. I make it clear that I'm not out to get rid of the legal pornography industry. What consenting adults do with each other is not my business, it's theirs.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it's legal and you're not hurting another person,
Mm-hmm.
people are free to do what adults are
Mm-hmm.
free to do what they want to do. This is about people who are not consenting, who are victims, who are children. And that's what this has always been about. And it's what it's about today, and everybody's welcome to participate. So
Well, you are doing really powerful work, and I think it is incredible the changes that we've already seen with the biggest company on the planet in that industry. So hopefully the others follow suit. Can you tell the listeners how they can support your cause, where they can get your book, like plug away?
yeah. So you can follow me on social media at Laila Mickelwait. I'm always posting about all this. Anytime if you want to update on what's the latest, what's happening, like I will post away on Twitter, and mostly on Twitter and Instagram. And then my organization is the Justice Defense Fund, and that's at justicedefensefund.org. You can read the book. It's called Takedown: Inside the Fight to Shut Down Pornhub for Child Abuse, Rape, and Sex Trafficking. And that's available wherever books are sold. So any online major retailer like Amazon or Barnes & Noble, you can go to your local bookstore and get it. If they don't have it, you can order it. It's on Kindle. It's on Audible. I can't. Yeah. I just like for the first time was hearing the Audible yesterday because it's like I can't stand hearing my own voice. But anyway, it's on Audible. It's on Kindle. It's hardcover as well. And you can read that. And in my hope for that, all author royalty proceeds are being donated 100% to the Justice Defense Fund for the first 3,000 books that are sold. There's a donor who's doing a $30 match donation to the Justice Defense Fund as well. And my hope for that book is that people who read it will go on a journey of discovery with me, that they will, it's told in first person. Some people are calling it a detective thriller style, book where it's the page turner. Like people are like, I was up all night reading it. And I'm like, that's amazing. I love it. I love that. But my hope is that you'll go on this journey. You'll meet the victims. You'll meet the whistleblowers. You'll actually experience what I experienced. And not that I want people to be traumatized by witnessing the videos that I witnessed, but I think it's important for people to get the truth. And, it's the truth on the public record. And the truth, I think, is what's going to ultimately pave the way for freedom for so many people and justice. And so you can get the book, and then you can also join we created Team Takedown. So Team Takedown is like a commitment to become like a monthly supporter for as little as like $10 a month, read the book, sign the petition, the Trafficking Hub petition. You can still do that. People are signing it every day. And we want to not only take down Pornhub, we want to take down illegal content across the internet. And that's our goal. So you can do that too.
Amazing, Laila. And again, thank you so much. And I'll make sure I link that below for everyone to check out all your stuff.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. It was so great to talk to you.
You too.
Uh-huh.
And that's it for this week's episode of Chatting with Candice. Before you go, please click that 5-star review. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.